Well, welcome to another Friday night. I want to start a new little series on anger. About 7 or 8 years ago, I filmed the series that became part of our Lift and React programs, and it's been a while since I've added anything to that series, so I thought I would do a series that would still go through some important stuff about anger and complex trauma, but also spend a lot of time just on some very helpful tools as well. So I hope it's going to be helpful to you. Part of why I want to do this is because over the past 20 some years, I've taught many classes on anger to thousands of people. And what I've realized is that people with complex trauma, they struggle with layers of anger greater than most people struggle. There's just extra levels that need to be understood and explored if they're really going to get the help they need to deal with their anger. And the assumption, which I believe is true, is that most people with complex trauma struggle with anger. They may have buried it deep, but once they become aware of it, they realize, yes, anger, there's a lot there, and it's been an issue for many years. But what I've also found is that anger is one of the most difficult emotions to deal with because it's turbocharged by cortisol. It's got extra chemicals. It's very intense. It happens very quickly. It's part of our survival system. And so it's just very difficult to deal with. And so what I have found for many people is they get all kinds of theoretical tools about dealing with anger, but those tools just don't seem to work when they get triggered, or those tools aren't accessible to them. They just forget all about them because the intensity of the trigger is so great that those tools don't work. And so it's like there's another set of tools that they need to be able to learn and access if they're really going to get help for their anger. And then I think there's another thing that I've realized over the years, and it's this. Many people have come to our program because of anger issues and the problems that it's caused in their relationships and their family. And what I've realized is they're still looking to get rid of their anger. They're operating off this subconscious belief that healthy people don't struggle with anger at all, that sometimes they get to a point where they just resolve everything internally. They go through life with this peaceful, unruffled spirit. And so they don't want to experience anger. They want to get to a point where they get rid of all anger. So they're still thinking that anger is bad. And so I hope we can kind of put that to rest as well, because there's still a part of anger that is very good. And it's really the challenge for people from complex trauma is distinguishing between healthy and unhealthy anger, and then learning how to express healthy anger in very appropriate ways. So, like I say in the anger series, there's really two key things I think to understand about anger where it is a very good force. So the first is that anger is triggered and it's designed to alert you when something violates love. So if somebody cheats on you or lies to you or disrespects you or is unjust to you, all of a sudden you get angry, and you should. Because anger is basically saying, hey, if you continue lying to me, you're hurting our relationship. It's going to go to a very unhealthy place where we can't trust each other. So anger is saying, this is going to destroy the relationship. We need to get back to honesty, to truthfulness. And it gives you the motivation and desire and energy to try to push the relationship back within the bounds of love to a healthy place. So if you look at most people from complex trauma, much of the anger they have in early life is really healthy anger because they were lied to, they were disrespected, life wasn't fair to them, they were betrayed, they were cheated on. All kinds of love things were violated, but they weren't able to bring the relationship back to healthy because the authorities in their life weren't willing to change. And so their anger just stayed there and festered. The second thing about anger is part of your body's protection system. And so if you are in danger, the nervous system's first place to go to protect you is fight or flight, to the sympathetic vagal state. And that usually involves anger. Anger allows you to fight harder. Anger allows you to flee faster. There's cortisol involved, adrenaline involved. And so anger increases your power. It increases your ability to fight or flight. And so anger, for most people with complex trauma, started off as something that was just very protective. It was trying to keep them safe. It wasn't something that was malicious. They weren't trying to hurt others. They weren't trying to destroy others. They were just trying to stay safe. So it's important to understand that. I think for many, they learned how to use anger in a malicious way, and that developed for them, and they're going to have to understand that and unlearn that. But originally, anger was something that was designed as a way to protect them when their life was in a lot of danger. So let's go to this reality that people with complex trauma struggle with anger more than others. And so we're going to look at some of the reasons why, the long-term effects of trauma. And so how it affects the brain, the nervous system, your emotional regulations, and other things. So what I want you to see from this is that the problem isn't the anger, it's that your survival system, which anger was part of, had become overreactive. It was necessary so often, so much, that it became a problem. So again, it's not that anger's bad, it's that your environment created a system where anger was necessary all the time to protect you. And so it then became something that seemed as if it was bad, but it was really this unsafe environment. So let's look at the first thing. So when a person is in danger, they go to that sympathetic vagal state, fight or flight. That's their first way of protecting, and anger is part of that. Now, the design of that is they get through fight or flight to a place of safety again. And then all of that relaxes. They don't have to be angry anymore. They don't have to have cortisol anymore. They can go back to being in this very connected, safe, healthy place, their ventrovagal state. But what happens in complex trauma where you're constantly in danger? Then you have to be in this sympathetic state all the time. And so anger is part of that all the time. And so your default setting in your nervous system becomes anger, your sympathetic vagal state with anger as the protector. And so for so many people from complex trauma, that's the case. They have been in their sympathetic vagal state to survive for so long, and anger's been part of that, that they now constantly live in this fight or flight response that just is constantly activated. They're always on edge, and anger is part of them. It keeps them sharp. It's helping to protect them. And so their stress hormones stay elevated. Their body is always ready to react. Their emotional reactions are faster than their thinking. So they're reacting before they've thought it through. So they just get stuck in this default setting of the sympathetic vagal state because of what their childhood was like. And so that just means anger is now part of their adult life way more than they would like it to be. But there's a second piece, and it's what's happening in the brain. When you're in this sympathetic vagal state, your brain now is constantly looking for danger. It's scanning, it's on high alert. And so that means your amygdala, your threat detention center, becomes overreactive. That means your prefrontal cortex isn't able to think logically because the emotions are taking over. And your prefrontal cortex isn't able to calm those emotions because you're in survival mode. And so they're taking over. So the limbic brain is dominating the cortex. And then your hippocampus, which helps you distinguish between past and present, becomes less effective because it's like your past and your present are the same thing because your past is being triggered all the time by the present. And so, as a result, the smallest little things can trigger a great big reaction. The body responds to small things as if they were big things. And that can be a lot of anger. And you can get triggered by so many little things during a day, during a week, that causes you to have regular anger explosions. The third thing, and this is important to think about, is that for many children from complex trauma, anger actually was the only safe emotion. Now, you might say, well, it wasn't safe for me. If I got angry, I got punished. But think about it from this perspective. Usually in many complex trauma homes, if you are sad, you get punished. If you show fear, you get punished. If you show grief, you get punished. If you show vulnerability, you get punished, or that's used against you. So emotions basically aren't safe. But when you're feeling angry, no, you might not be expressing it because that's would get punished. But you're feeling angry and you go into, I'm self-righteous, I'm better than you, I'm right, you're wrong. I go to revenge fantasies. I have all of this anger happening. There's a sense of safety that comes from that. And then if you intimidate others with that anger, then you feel a bit of control, which increases the amount of safety. And so what happens for you is when I'm in an angry state, that's my most protected place. So anger equals protection. So I need to stay angry to stay safe. And so what you have learned is anger equals protection. But later in life, that can be a problem because now anger is being activated and expressed when you're not even in danger and it's doing a lot of damage. There's a fourth thing that I think is so important that comes out of complex trauma. So if emotions aren't safe to express in your family, you suppress them. You suppress grief, you suppress fear, you suppress hurt, you suppress sadness, all of the emotions you push down. And that results in all of these kind of emotions that are just unresolved, building up. It's powerful. And then what can happen is anger comes in as a way to express them and to medicate them. That's why we call it a secondary emotion. I'd rather feel angry than sad. Rather feel angry than hurt. I'd rather feel angry than fear. I'd rather feel anger than shame. And so anger becomes a way, as soon as I'm feeling an unpleasant emotion I don't want to feel, I switch to anger because then I don't have to feel that emotion. So this quick little switch takes place subconsciously that now causes anger to occur very frequently because I don't want to feel any of those other suppressed emotions. Another one that is very important to understand is that much of complex trauma for a child is injustice. They're not being treated fairly. The boundaries aren't fair for them as they are for their dad. The rules for dad are different than the rules for them. One sibling is treated differently than the other. Things happen and nobody's taking responsibility for. They're blaming you. And so there's injustice, injustice, injustice. And then nobody's protecting you. You don't have any sense of control or agency over your environment. And just everything is just feeling so unfair. You feel so powerless to do anything about it. And so that anger is a healthy response to that. This isn't right. This isn't the way life should be. I want to change it, but I can't. And so you got all this bottled up anger. And what can happen with that is now, today in adult life, that any sign of injustice, whether in the world, whether in your life, at work, at home explosion. It starts to just come out. The volcano erupts. And so injustice becomes this massive trigger of anger today. The next one I think is really important to understand, and that is for many people, when they grew up in complex trauma, they weren't taught tools on how to regulate their anger. That was never role modeled for them. That was never taught for them. If dad got angry, he just lashed out. If mom got angry, she just became passive aggressive. Nobody talked about it. Nobody owned their part. Nobody processed through it. Nobody expressed it in a way that didn't violate love. It was just all kinds of unhealthy tools were role modeled for you. And then if you got angry, you didn't have anybody to co-regulate with that would help you process, settle down, and get through it. And so you just used the tools that were role modeled for you, which weren't healthy. And so now when you feel anger, you go back to the tools that you were given and express it in unhealthy ways. And that becomes a problem in your relationships. And then the final one is, I don't think people understand how much anger comes out of shame. So if you think of a child that has shame, where I'm not good enough, I'm the reason I'm disrespected, that I am not listened to, that I'm neglected, that I'm abandoned, that I'm not accepted, that nobody wants to connect with me. And then to not have anybody I can trust, to have people that betray me all the time. Anger, anger, anger. And then I hate myself. I don't like who I am because I'm not good enough. I'm the screw up here. So they got anger at themselves, anger at their environment, anger at the world, anger at God, anger at everything. But it's just this deep burning anger that is part of shame. And that for many starts to come out in their teens and then into their adult life. So what I hope you realize is people from complex trauma, there's a ton of anger below the surface. Now, they may have disconnected from it, suppressed it so much that they're not even be aware of it. And part of what we're going to do in the next talks is try to become aware of it. They may not be one of those exploders all the time. They may direct their anger at themselves. They may direct their anger in passive aggressive ways, but it's still anger that is there, that is being acted on. And so we really want to understand how much anger we have, the patterns we have for what we do with that anger, and then whether those are healthy or unhealthy tools, and then develop healthy tools. So I hope you'll stick with us as we go through this. I hope it'll be very helpful for you. Thank you.